Article 26, Habilitation and Rehabilitation. States parties shall take effective and appropriate measures, including through peer support, to enable persons with disabilities to attain and maintain maximum independence, full physical, mental, social, and vocational ability, and full inclusion and participation in all aspects of life. To that end, states parties shall organize, strengthen, and extend comprehensive habilitation and rehabilitation services and programs, particularly in the areas of health, employment, education, and social services, in such a way that these services and programs begin at the earliest possible stage and are based on the multidisciplinary assessment of individual needs and strengths, support participation and inclusion in the community and all aspects of society, are voluntary, and are available to persons with disabilities as close as possible to their own communities, including in rural areas. States parties shall promote the development of initial and continuing training for professionals and staff working in habilitation and rehabilitation services. States parties shall promote the availability, knowledge, and use of assistive devices and technologies designed for persons with disabilities as they relate to habilitation and rehabilitation. Article 27, Work and Employment. States parties recognize the right of persons with disabilities to work on an equal basis with others. This includes the right to the opportunity to gain a living by work freely chosen or accepted in a labor market and a work environment that is open, inclusive, and accessible to persons with disabilities. States parties shall safeguard and promote the realization of the right to work, including for those who acquire a disability during the course of employment, by taking appropriate steps, including through legislation to, inter alia, prohibit discrimination on the basis of disability with regard to all matters concerning all forms of employment, including conditions of recruitment, hiring, and employment, continuance of employment, career advancement, and safe and healthy working conditions. Protect the rights of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others to just and favorable conditions of work, including equal opportunities and equal remuneration for work of equal value, safe and healthy working conditions, including protection from harassment and the redress of grievance. Ensure that persons with disabilities are able to exercise their labor and trade union rights on an equal basis with others. Enable persons with disabilities to have effective access to general, technical, and vocational guidance programs, placement services, and vocational and continuing training. Promote employment opportunities and career advancement for persons with disabilities in the labor market, as well as assistance in finding, obtaining, maintaining, and returning to employment. Promote opportunities for self-employment, entrepreneurship, the development of cooperatives, and starting one's own business. Employ persons with disabilities in the public sector. Promote the employment of persons with disabilities in the private sector through appropriate policies and measures, which may include affirmative action programs, incentives, and other measures. Ensure that reasonable accommodation is provided to persons with disabilities in the workplace. Promote the acquisition by persons with disabilities of work experience in the open labor market. Promote vocational and professional rehabilitation, job retention, and return to work programs for persons with disabilities. States parties shall ensure that persons with disabilities are not held in slavery or in servitude and are protected on an equal basis with others from forced or compulsory labor. Article 28, Adequate Standard of Living and Social Protection. States parties recognize the right of persons with disabilities to an adequate standard of living for themselves and their families, including adequate food, clothing, and housing, and to the continuous improvement of living conditions and shall take appropriate steps to safeguard and promote the realization of this right without discrimination on the basis of disability. States parties recognize the right of persons with disabilities to social protection and to the enjoyment of that right without discrimination on the basis of disability, and shall take appropriate steps to safeguard and promote the realization of this right, including measures to ensure equal access by persons with disabilities to clean water services, and to ensure access to appropriate and affordable services, devices, and other assistance for disability-related needs, to ensure access by persons with disabilities, in particular women and girls with disabilities and older persons with disabilities, to social protection programs and poverty reduction programs, to ensure access by persons with disabilities and their families living in situations of poverty to assistance from the states with disability-related expenses, including adequate training, counseling, financial assistance, and respite care. To ensure access by persons with disabilities to public housing programs. To ensure equal access by persons with disabilities to retirement benefits and programs. Article 29. Participation in political and public life. States parties shall guarantee to persons with disabilities political rights and the opportunity to enjoy them on an equal basis with others, and shall undertake to ensure that persons with disabilities can effectively and fully participate in political and public life on an equal basis with others, directly or through freely chosen representatives, including the right and opportunity for persons with disabilities to vote and be elected inter alia by ensuring that voting procedures, facilities, and materials are appropriate, accessible, and easy to understand and use, protecting the right of persons with disabilities to vote by secret ballot in elections and public referendums without intimidation, and to stand for elections to effectively hold office and perform all public functions at all levels of government, facilitating the use of assistive and new technologies where appropriate, guaranteeing the free expression of the will of persons with disabilities as electors, and to this end, where necessary, at their request, allowing assistance in voting by a person of their own choice, to promote actively an environment in which persons with disabilities can effectively and fully participate in the conduct of public affairs without discrimination and on an equal basis with others, and encourage that participation in public affairs, including participation in non-governmental organizations and associations concerned with the public and political life of the country, and in the activities and administration of political parties, forming and joining organizations of persons with disabilities to represent persons with disabilities at international, national, regional, and local levels. Article 30. Participation in cultural life, recreation, leisure, and sport. States parties recognize the rights of persons with disabilities to take part on an equal basis with others in cultural life, and shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy access to cultural materials in accessible formats, enjoy access to television programs, films, theater, and other cultural activities in accessible formats, enjoy access to places for cultural performance or services, such as theaters, museums, cinemas, libraries, and tourism services, and, as far as possible, enjoy access to monuments and sites of national cultural importance. States parties shall take appropriate measures to enable persons with disabilities to have the opportunity to develop and utilize their creative, artistic, and intellectual potential, not only for their own benefit, but also for the enrichment of society. States parties shall take all appropriate steps in accordance with international law to ensure that laws protecting intellectual property rights do not constitute an unreasonable or discriminatory barrier to access by persons with disabilities to cultural materials. Persons with disabilities shall be entitled on an equal basis with others to recognition and support of their specific cultural and linguistic identity, including sign languages and deaf culture. With a view to enabling persons with disabilities to participate on an equal basis with others in recreational, leisure, and sporting activities, states parties shall take appropriate measures to encourage and promote the participation to the fullest extent possible of persons with disabilities in mainstream sporting activities at all levels, to ensure that persons with disabilities have opportunity to organize, develop, and participate in disability-specific sporting and recreational activities, and to this end, encourage the provision on an equal basis with others of appropriate instruction, training, and resources. To ensure that persons with disabilities have access to sporting, recreational, and tourism venues. To ensure that children with disabilities have equal access with other children to participate in play, recreation, and leisure and sporting activities, including those activities in the school system. To ensure that persons with disabilities have access to services from those involved in the organization of recreation, tourism, leisure, and sporting activities.